Yo guys, what is up? Max in our episode of Finding Your Vault Hunter, the multi-part series brought to you by Gearbox and 2K, where I, Moxsy, break down all the different Vault Hunters and all of the different Borderlands games. Now, today's episode is near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about Borderlands 3. Now, Borderlands 3 has some of the most in-depth characters in that they've got so much going on with their skill trees. There's so many ways to build them. So for episode 4 and episode 5, I'm actually going to be splitting Borderlands 3 into 2 different episodes. We're going to be doing 2 of the Vault Hunters today, and then 2 of the Vault Hunters in the episode 5 series. So we're going to be diving even more in depth with these characters because there's so much to talk about. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. Borderlands 3 is the most recent entry in the mainline Borderlands games, and with it comes a lot of changes, not only to like guns, story, gameplay, and all those things, but also to the Vault Hunters. And one of the biggest changes is in Borderlands 1, the pre-sequel Borderlands 2, every Vault Hunter had one action skill, and what Borderlands 3 introduced is every character having multiple action skills. Not only that, but they moved all of the augments out of the actual skill tree. So for example, in Borderlands 2, if you wanted to put missiles on your turret for Axton, you would need to spec that in your skill tree. In Borderlands 3, they moved all of the augments and ways to change your action skill into things off the side called augments, and then the actual skill tree is just focused on your character. This opens up a lot more depth into your character build and customization and how you want to use your action skill, because you can drastically change the way that it functions with these different augments. Now, the very first Vault Hunter we need to talk about is Flack the Beastmaster. Flack specializes in range damage and crit damage, and the one thing that sets them really apart from all of the other Vault Hunters that we've seen in prior games is their ability to summon pets. Flack can have a companion at their side at all times, and the companions that you summon are specialized to how you want to play. If you want to have a elemental spider ant that buffs up your fire damage and does close range elemental novas, you can do that. If you want to have a jabber that has a shotgun that shoots enemies at ranged and runs around buffing up your movement speed, you can do that. There's a bunch of different customizations and ways to play Flack in just their companions. Now, Flack has 4 different action skills that all play very differently. There is Gamma Burst, which summons your pet through a radiation rift, and during the time that Gamma Burst is up, your pet is unkillable, and it is larger and does more damage to enemies. Synergizes very well with companion skills. Flack's second action skill is Rack Attack. This sends forward multiple racks that you can augment with cryo damage and the ability to heal you whenever they hit enemies, similar to how Mordecai works, but with more customization. And then Flack's other action skill is Fade Away, which turns Flack invisible, giving you health regeneration, movement speed, and more damage while you are in this Fade Away, giving you guaranteed critical hits, and you can augment that to keep firing your weapon while you're in Fade Away without consuming any of its charges. And lastly, Flack has Gravity Snare. This tosses a trap out that knocks enemies up and stuns them. It'll levitate them. Think you're hovering all these enemies in the air, similar to how Maya was in Borderlands 2, but more customized to Flack. Some of Flack's signature skills and capstones include Dominance, where if you crit an enemy while aiming down sights, you establish dominance over that enemy, turning them to your side, where that enemy will fight alongside you, so you can have multiple companions, and that enemy will constantly lose health, and all of the enemies around you will target that enemy. This is great for survivability for Flack, but also allows Flack to deal more damage because Flack also has skills to deal more damage to enemies that aren't targeting you, which this synergizes very well with. Flack also has the capstone ability Megavore, which allows any of your gunshots to then be critical hits, allowing you to deal critical hits constantly to enemies, regardless of the weapon that you're using. And then Flax has more synergies with this, such as Leave No Trace. Whenever you score a critical hit, you get ammo back. And with Head Count, whenever you score a critical hit, you get your action skill cooldown reduced. So now you're shooting your guns at enemies, dealing tons of critical hits, constantly getting ammo back, and constantly refunding those action skills that are so important. Flack also has the ability Lick the Wounds, that if you ever go into fight for your life and your pet is alive, they will attempt to revive you, and the power inside in Flack's Stalker tree allows Flack and Flack's pet to deal 50% more damage for 15 seconds if you ever use your action skill at full health. Flack is really great if you're looking to play Borderlands 3 as a solo player, because you're always going to have your companion by your side who will distract enemies, deal damage to them, revive you, and has so much functionality, as well as Flack being a really strong character when it comes to the damage department, going invisible so enemies can't hit you, dealing tons of crit and getting your ammo back. And if you're looking for a high damage like ranged playstyle, while also having the added functionality of having a pet by your side at all times, Flack is great for that. Our next Vault Hunter that we get to talk about is Amara. Now, Amara is my most played Vault Hunter out of all of the characters in all of the Borderlands games. There is no character that I understand quite as well as her. I've posted probably at least 50 different build videos on just Amara and the different combinations that she can do. She's got incredible build diversity, and she does some things very, very well that I want to break down for you. So Amara's 4 base action skills are Phase Flare, Phase Cast, Phase Grasp, and Phase Slam. And what I mean by their core is these are the base action skills that you get. However, as you work down the skill tree, there's ways to change them and augment them. For example, Phase Grasp is very similar to Maya's Phase Lock, where you hold an enemy in place and then can shoot at them while they can't fight back. However, with Amara, you can augment this as you work down the tree. So, for example, you can unlock Fist Over Matter, that now you Phase Lock that enemy, or Phase Grasp that enemy, and then you summon Fist that will slam that enemy and all the enemies around them for tons of damage. Another one is Ties That Bind. Ties That Bind, you Phase Grasp that enemy, and then that enemy is linked to all the nearby enemies, and then all the damage that you deal is shared between all of the linked enemies. This is just a few of the different combinations. For example, Phase Slam, you slam down on enemies with your fist explosions, and then the Fracture allows you, instead of jumping up into the air and slamming down, Fracture allows you to send a line of fists at enemies, and so you can take these base action skills and augment them to do different things. Amara's Fist of the Elements tree is all about doing elemental damage. We've got Infusion, which allows you to convert a portion of the damage that you're dealing into your action skill element. So if you find a non-elemental weapon that you really like, but you want it to do elemental damage, you can then use Infusion to convert 40% of that damage into fire damage. There's also Tempest, which increases all of your elemental damage and further increases your shock damage. And I've talked previously about how much I love the ability to ricochet your bullets. Maya had this skill, Nisha had this skill, and Amara also has a similar skill called Indiscriminate, which allows you to ricochet your bullets to enemies for reduced damage, and then while your action skill is active, Phase Grasp, you're going to be dealing even more ricochet chance and more ricochet damage of these bullets. And then lastly, Amara's Capstone, Forceful Expression, allows all of your guns to deal bonus elemental damage of your selected action skill element. This gives you the choice of the bonus element that you want to get. If you want to go for a shock build, you can select the shock augment, and then all of your guns are going to be dealing bonus shock damage. If you want fire, you can do that, and you've got incredible control about the elemental damage that you want to deal. Amara's Mystical Assault tree makes Amara better with guns and also adds additional functionality to your action skills. Amara's Capstone skill, Avatar, allows you to use your action skill twice. So if you want to Phase Grasp an enemy, kill them, and then Phase Grasp more enemies, you can do that. If you want to cast multiple Phase Casts or multiple Phase Slams, you can do that with the Avatar, and it's also going to allow you to build up bonus rush stacks. Rush stacks are a stacking effect that Amara can get in the Mystical Assault tree to give you more action skill damage, more status effect chance, and more reload speed. Also, in Amara's Mystical Assault tree, we get the skill Remnant. Remnant allows you to overkill enemies. So whenever you kill an enemy with overkill damage, meaning you do more damage than they have health, you summon a Remnant Orb, which will fly out and seek out other enemies for overkill damage that you deal. So no damage is wasted. It's a really, really powerful skill. Now, what really sets Amara apart from the other Sirens is her Brawl tree. Yes, you could do some melee things on the other Sirens, but Amara really has a big emphasis on it. In her Brawl tree, we get skills like Find Your Center, which gives you 100% melee damage and more melee range after you use your action skill. She's got skills like Blitz, which allow you to dash towards enemies, dealing high elemental damage, and if you kill an enemy with Blitz, it resets, kind of how Zero could go into those crazy melee chains. Amara can go into Blitz chains, just hitting enemies and hitting enemies for massive damage and dashing between them. And she's also got a lot of survivability skills to pair with that so that you can be comfortable up close in that melee range. And lastly, Amara's Enlightened Force tree really cements her mastery of the elements in adding cryo damage as a augment, so that now you can add bonus cryo damage to all of your weapons and adding a new focus on cryo damage and more melee. Now, in Borderlands 3, if you have an enemy that is frozen, you deal increased melee damage to them. So the Enlightened Force skill tree has lots of skills that allow you to deal bonus cryo damage for cryo shards, or free the souls to splinter out and hit enemies and freeze them. And then you've got skills that increase your melee damage so that you're freezing everything constantly, and then you're getting this massive damage multiplier against those frozen enemies with all of your melee abilities. Now, a big reason I've got so many hours on Amara is because of her build diversity. If you want to go a pure melee elemental build, you can do that. If you want to use ranged elemental with guns, you can do that. If you want to purely focus on the damage of your action skills, you can do that. There's so many different ways to play in terms of playstyles, weapons, gear, and Borderlands 3 has so many weapons and gear and things to pair with the playstyles that you want to work towards that you can really use anything. Now, my all-time favorite synergy in Borderlands 3, and particularly on Amara, has to do with the legendary artifact, the Elemental Projector. This artifact reads, while suffering an elemental effect, increase your damage with that same element. So, for example, if I'm on fire, I will deal 129% more fire damage. If I'm corroded, I will deal 129% more corrosion damage. Now, originally when Borderlands 3 came out, I was using this with a pistol called the Sellout Pistol, which had a high status chance, and I would actually shoot myself in the foot or on the ground so that I could light myself on fire and then deal more damage with fire weapons. Now, this was really strong, but it was a little bit difficult to use because you're constantly having to swap weapons and shoot yourself in the foot, and then you get this damage bonus, and then as soon as it wears off, you have to swap weapons and then shoot yourself in the foot again. Now, what Gearbox added after this became a very popular thing to do is the Spiritual Driver class mod, and this synergizes so well with Amara. This reads, whenever Amara activates her action skill, she applies her action skill element to herself. Amara's gun damage is increased while moving. The quicker she moves, the greater the gun damage bonus is. So now with the Spiritual Driver equipped, I no longer have to shoot myself. I can just use my action skill. So I can use my action skill, and now, as you can see, my screen is being shocked. My character has the shock effect, and I'm going to be dealing 129% more shock damage. However, what's even crazier about this is I'm going to be moving faster. The reason I'm moving so fast is because the Spiritual Driver also specs into the skill Mindfulness. Mindfulness means whenever we take damage, we actually get to move faster. And the way that the Spiritual Driver works is the faster you're moving, the more gun damage that you deal. So now all of a sudden, I use my action skill once, and I've got an elemental effect, which is giving me 129% more elemental damage with that specific element, and I'm going to proc Mindfulness, which is going to give me a ton of movement speed. As you can see, I'm really fast, and then that movement speed translates to gun damage, and this is just such a satisfying synergy. One of my favorite things about the Borderlands franchise is finding these synergies and these interactions that work really well on classes, and this synergy is just so clean with Amara, and it's one of many. There's so many different synergies. It's part of the reason I have so much time on this character, and that's not only for Amara. Borderlands 3 opened up so many possibilities for build diversity with all of the different action skill augments, the ways to play the different characters, all of the gear that are in this game, and it's why it's my personal favorite of the Borderlands games. Guys, that is going to do it for episode 4 of Finding Your Vault Hunter. In episode 5, we're going to be talking about Zane and Moze, the 2 other playable characters in Borderlands 3, both of which I have a ton of time on. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.